Austin Tech Connect is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Founded in 1992, ATC exists to help unite the local technology ecosystem and to encourage the spread of community, collaboration, and conversations in Central Texas. This podcast is sponsored by SailPoint. They are a leading provider of identity security for the modern enterprise, empowering organizations worldwide to put identity security at the core of their business. With a foundation of artificial intelligence and machine learning, SailPoint Identity Security delivers the right access to the right identities and resources at the right time. Now, here is this week's episode.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. My name is Tom Singer, and I've been with ATC for about a year and a half, and we started this program in early 2023, so now we're up to about 70 episodes, where every single week we try to bring you interviews with really interesting people in our technology ecosystem who are running companies, doing things that matter, and who have a vision for what the future looks like. And today I'm excited because we are joined by Omeed Badkoobeh. And Omeed is the co-founder and CEO of Yotta Energy. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom, great to be here. Thank you.
No, I'm excited to learn a little bit about you and about Yotta and everything that you are doing. So for those of you who don't know Omeed, he is the CEO and co-founder of Yotta Energy, and he is passionate about the solar industry and about everything that has to do with new technologies. And he's not just excited about solar when it comes to like the big things that we see in the press and everything else, but he really cares about how does this impact the masses? How is solar really the ultimate decentralized power source? And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get into the interview. So, Omeed, you started this company about 6 years ago, but I want to go into the Wayback Machine. Where'd you go to school? How'd you get started? How'd you get involved with solar and power and energy?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom. So I went to LSU, Louisiana State University. I actually studied international studies, which was going to set me on a track to work for the State Department and global diplomacy, global policy. And it was through an accidental occurrence that I was in UCLA for a semester, finishing up some credits, and I discovered solar. There was a home that was listed on the market that was completely off-grid. And it just captured my imagination. I was like, this is amazing. We can power homes with solar energy. And came back, finished my degree, and completely dove right into the solar industry. This was almost 16 years ago when folks did solar because they wanted to feel good about helping the environment. And now it's economical, by and large, the economic reasons drive the industry.
So it's interesting you say 16 years ago. There's been a lot of technological advancements in solar in the past 16 years. What are the biggest changes sort of that you've seen being in that industry?
Yes, there has. The biggest change is just the cost, right? When I first got into solar, a leading solar module was around maybe 150 watts, and it was $5, $6 a watt. Today, the average solar module is between 400 to 500 watts per module, and its prices, I've seen prices as low as 19 cents recently.
Wow.
So you can imagine how much the cost of the technology has come down. It's been quite impressive. The other area of innovation, which Yotta plays into, is how do we make these systems smarter and more decentralized and safer? And we've seen a lot of innovations with, microinverters for the residential market that simplify it, make it very safe, low voltage. You can literally dial in and see every single solar panel on your home. What Yotta is pioneering is kind of the evolution of that. How do we take energy storage and apply those same principles?
So, it's really interesting because I'm thinking back sort of in my own Wayback Machine, and, we used to have sort of the energy industry. I mean, that takes a lot of forms, but we had the energy industry, and then we had sort of technology. And now all companies are technology companies. How has energy and technology merged in what you've seen over the past couple of decades?
I would say energy is probably the last frontier that hasn't been yet revolutionized by technology.
Ooh, tell me more. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, we still the old ways of doing things is a centralized grid, a centralized power plant. Whether that power plant is coal, natural gas, or nuclear, or solar, even it's centralized. It's in one central location, and it produces and distributes like kilowatt hours in one direction. Right. The grid of the future is going to be decentralized. Every building will have a living system that produces energy, and there will be a lot of moments where it will produce more energy than that building can use. And that can then either go to an electric vehicle, it can go to batteries, or it can export to the next building. And so we are going to get into the era of a smart grid, a decentralized grid. And there's going to be a lot of technology that plays into that. And we're still in the beginning stages of that.
That's still super new. I was at a friend's brand new house built in the hills outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this is state of the art, wonderfully amazing home that my friend had built. And his house is set up exactly the way you were explaining it. And he was explaining to me that the energy can go back to the grid, but also then he has these giant Tesla batteries in his garage that take up an entire wall, and he can store enough power in those batteries to power his home for quite a while. So, I mean, is this going to be something we all have? Like I thought, well, this is just my sort of technology advanced friend who's got the money to do this, but is this going to become the norm?
I think so. Tesla's done an amazing job pioneering a lot of this industry, as they have for electric vehicles. But the reality is that we're still at the beginning. Every home in the future will have solar and a battery, the same way every home now has HVAC, right? An air conditioner, a heat pump, a dryer. It'll become a commonplace appliance. What Yotta focuses on is what we call the commercial industrial market. So we don't do any residential homes. We focus on buildings, your strip malls, your office parks, your industrial sites, your warehouses. That's kind of our core focus area. And the reason is the C&I market accounts for 76% of the consumption of electricity. 76% of the consumption of electricity in the United States goes to the C&I market. And believe it or not, this market only has 4% adoption of solar today. Anytime you fly in an airplane, you look over, you're landing, you see a bunch of empty rooftops, and you're like, we're putting all these solar panels on homes. Why are we not putting them on these buildings where the economies of scale would make more sense, right? And so that's kind of it. And I actually spent a lot of my career on the residential side doing residential systems, batteries. But I wanted to scale bigger. I wanted to hit the bigger problems, which was how do we scale this into bigger systems?
It's interesting because I've never looked out the window and looked at empty roofs before and thought, why aren't there solar panels on all of these warehouses and everything around the airport? But I'll be on a plane. I'll be on a plane in a couple of days, and I think now I'll be looking at every industrial roof out there, thinking they're missing out. They need Yotta.
I go a step further, Tom. When I drive around, I have my map on my car in satellite mode, and I'm literally looking at all the rooftops. Like, there's an open market opportunity. There's an open market opportunity. So there's a lot of rooftops. We have a lot of potential to build more distributed, decentralized generation.
So, we brought up Tesla, and, like I said, my friend has an entire wall of these giant Tesla batteries in his garage. You actually spent a little bit of your time at Tesla back when they were just a car company, though, right?
Correct. I joined Tesla. I don't remember the exact year, but it was a lot earlier stage than now. They had just launched the Model S, which was the flagship vehicle that was kind of somewhat built from the ground up. It's still borrowed from a lot of other companies. But they were doing amazing things. And I learned a lot. It was a very inspiring time. And it probably was the motivating factor of why I started my own company.
Nice. So when did you get to Austin? And let's talk about when you started the company and where you went from there.
Sure. So I lived abroad in China for a while. We were teaching at the international school system. I actually taught for 2 years, which was a very interesting experience. And then I tried to start a company in China, building prefab modern homes to integrate solar. Came back from China. I was in Seattle for a while, where I worked at Tesla. But then, we were trying to figure out where we were going to settle in the US. And it was either LA area or Austin. I had a cousin living here. And after going to Barton Springs Pool, I was like, this is a cool place to settle. So I had no plans of starting a company at that point. We were just looking for a cool place to settle. This was almost 10 years ago.
So let's talk about the company. Let's talk about how you got it up and going. Let's talk about, you said you're co-founder and CEO. Let's talk about your co-founder and where you guys are now.
Yeah. So, the company started, there was a function actually put on by ATI, which I think is related to Austin Technology Council.
Yeah, Austin Technology Council was actually founded out of Austin Technology Incubator and IC Squared 32 years ago. So yeah, we have our roots tie right back to ATI.
Our first pilot system was at that building. So I remember because I had to cut down bamboo to put the ballast to put the demo system. So so like most great companies, the company started in a garage. It was me and the co-founder, and his garage was the electrical and mine was the mechanical, and we start building the parts and developing what became the core IP, the core innovation in the company. And at that point, it was kind of just an idea, but we did a lot of market research. We knew that folks will be integrating batteries with power conversion and software into products like the Powerwall. And we said, well, how can we be 10 years ahead of this innovation? And having been kind of a student of the industry, I said, well, microinverters greatly simplified solar and made power conversion safer and easier, and any contractor can get in and learn how to deploy solar. If someone could do that with a battery, it would simplify the heck out of these systems. And also, I used to install a lot of batteries. I used to design and install and sell. And where to put the batteries was probably the biggest pain point I always had to deal with, right? So the need becomes the mother of invention, as they say.
Yep.
So we started with this novel idea to create a micro battery. We call it the solar leaf that integrates, co-locates directly behind a solar module. And from there, it was creating the core technology, keeping the batteries safe and in a relatively comfortable temperature zone, and proving that it could last 20 years was the first thing to overcome. And then beyond that, it was picking which market would it be the best market to start with. We explored residential, we explored telecom, we explored all kinds of market applications. And it was just kind of through a pool. It was, in the C&I market, majority of these systems are ballasted, meaning that they don't put holes in the roof, but they're using a network of weight. And it just so turned out the first generation prototypes were somewhat heavy, and we said, wow, we could just replace this concrete ballast block with the weight of the battery. And also putting a battery, space savings seemed to matter more for commercial businesses rather than homeowners. And so that was why we chose that market segment.
Nice. And you said that you actually kind of incubated in the Austin Technology Incubator. What was that experience like? We're big fans of ATI. Austin Technology Council does a lot with them. But I don't know that I've had anyone on the show who has come out of that program. So what was that like for you?
It was very great early on. I think as an early stage startup, you have to basically do everything to build credibility and traction, right? And ATI kind of helped us through various programs. I think there's like the ATI SEAL program we did. There was a 3-day startup program that they were a part of. In fact, that's how the company initially started. All kinds of events. I mean, they had an event at South by Southwest that we were able to attend for free. It was like a smart cities thing, and we actually met several investors that invested in the company from that event. There was a grant that ATI helped us get with Austin Energy very early on. So very instrumental. A lot of these early stage companies, you just have to build that traction. And joining the incubator is one way to do that, especially when you get the credibility. They don't just let anyone join. They've got to look at your technology, understand your business model, and then have you come in.
So you now have about 40 employees. So what's going on now? Where are you now? What does the future of Yotta look like?
Yeah, we actually just moved into a new facility. We're a 40,000 square foot facility halfway between downtown and the airport. We love this location in Southeast Austin. And we're growing. We have a wonderful team of about 40 individuals. And we are in the process of raising our Series B fundraise. We're about to kick it off within a few weeks. And post closing the Series B, we'll probably double the headcount of the team.
Wow. That's awesome. That's good stuff. So what do you think the future holds?
For Yotta or just in general?
Let's start with Yotta.
The future is grand. There's the three T's of successful companies: the technology, the team, and then timing. And I now looking back, I think we maybe were a little early on the timing, but now the timing is really ripe for our market adoption. Most places, Austin Energy, for example, had a 50% rate increase for commercial businesses, 50%. You have the advent of electric vehicles. Simply put, we're going to need a lot more power. We're going to need a 2x increase in demand. And what folks don't realize is that even though we have electrified, our power demand has been somewhat stable because we've also learned efficiency. Mm-hmm. We've gone to LED light bulbs, higher efficient HVAC. So even though population has grown, Austin has grown, because of efficiency, we still haven't felt the effects of a huge influx of demand for energy. But we're about to go through that. Some folks still don't believe in electric vehicles. I like to think those are folks who have never driven an electric vehicle, because once you've driven one, it's hard to want to go back. But that power has got to come from somewhere. We're not building any more coal power plants. We're not building any more nuclear or natural gas power plants. Utility scale solar has about a 4-year backlog. So naturally, all of those rooftops that we talked about become great places to build distributed generation to power the increase in demand that's coming.
Nice.
So we're very excited about the market. We're ready to scale up and meet the demand that's up and coming.
Nice. Well, I want to jump over and talk a little bit about Austin, but we did talk a little bit before we started recording, and it impressed me and intrigued me about this idea of solar being this decentralized power, and your passion for how this isn't just for the big industrial companies, but this can really impact people all over the world. So let's talk about sort of how Yotta Energy and what you do and what you're passionate about. How does this impact the world? Over at the University of Texas, they have a saying that what starts here changes the world, and I love that saying. I think we should steal it and just make it our saying for the entire region, right? What we do here. So, how is what you're working on? How is it decentralized to impact everyone?
Yeah, I think as I gave you the example, one of the reasons I was really drawn into solar is it's the only form of energy generation that doesn't require something to move or spin, right? Everything else is kinetic, where a solar panel is just stationary and it takes the sun's photovoltaics and turns them into energy watts. And it can scale. Like, you literally have one solar module while you're camping. You can have two and power, a remote home somewhere with the basic necessities. You can put 5 together and power a small cabin. You put 20 together, you power a residential home. You put a couple hundred, you're powering a business. You put a couple thousand and you've got a utility scale power plant. Like, name another technology that can scale that way, that vertically, right? And I think as humanity, we're just seeing the benefits of solar starting to take fruit. If you look at countries, you'll see even in low income areas and countries, you're starting to see more and more solar, because it's the least expensive form of new energy generation. It's no longer just the feel good of, hey, I'm helping the planet. It's literally the cheapest way to make a kilowatt hour in most parts of the world. So, right, the missing thing has been the battery, right. And that's kind of what we are pioneering.
So in as we look at the developing world, right, we there's a lot of stuff talked about how, when we talk about telecommunications, they weren't wired, and then cell phones and wireless came out and they jumped forward so far. Are we seeing that starting to happen with solar? Are places that are super remote starting to take real big jumps when it comes to being able to access electricity?
We are, but the one misconception is, solar is kind of like the internet, right? You have Wi-Fi, but you also sometimes just need a LAN connection when you're doing a lot, right? You're still going to have the grid, right? But there are some cases by avoiding have to build out the grid, it's far more feasible, right? But I think we're already seeing. I mean, I think COVID kind of moved us in this direction of, like, what does it mean to work? Can people work remotely? There are folks now that expats that live all over the world, and they can work. I think solar plus Starlink are probably two of the most exciting combinations of things, because with solar, you can power yourself anywhere. And with Starlink, you can now you're connected to the global community from literally anywhere. Nice. So I think you mix those two things together, and we're going to have some very exciting innovations and changes in our and where people live, how people travel, and so forth.
Nice. So I do want to move over and talk about Austin, right? You came here, you weren't thinking of coming here to start a company, but a few years later, you started a company. Do you still think Austin's a great place to be a startup, and why?
I still do think Austin's a great place to do a startup, but it's changed a lot. When we first started the company, we raised a small pre-seed round of capital, and everyone was on a flat $50K salary here in Austin. And everyone was okay with that because 5 years ago, that was enough. So just in 5 years, it's changed dramatically where you need almost 2x that just to be able to live in Austin. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, it's not the only place to start a company. If I were starting a company that was people heavy or needed a lot of space, maybe I wouldn't choose Austin. I'd choose somewhere more affordable. But with that, the culture, the pool of talent, the vibrancy, the events, there's the other side of that, and it's still somewhat more affordable than the Bay Area. So,
sure. Well, I speak a lot on the history of Austin tech, right? I mean, this goes back decades to the foundations being laid. And I talk about the fact that we had, it wasn't really planned, but there were 10 pillars of things that really set Austin up for this amazing, technology center that we live in today. One of those pillars was affordability. And I talk about the fact that not all the pillars have to last, and new pillars are going to come in, right? We're starting to make strides in paying attention to things around, women-founded businesses and more diversity in tech and things like that. That's a new pillar that we're building, now. So things will replace affordability, and things will replace that pillar of sort of that weird vibe, right? I make the joke that when there's a Starbucks on every corner, I don't think you're as weird as you used to be. And so some things change, but even with less affordability, there's still things kind of in town that, we have access to that you can't find everywhere. So what do you think is the state of tech right now in Austin?
I think, I think it's, again, even though it has gotten very expensive, it is still relatively a affordable place to live, right? Texas has no income tax on your earnings, so that makes it relatively affordable. And I think there's plenty of room to grow. What I would really love to see is how do we build a bridge between Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, because that's what's missing, right?
And that's
it doesn't make sense to fly, but sit in a car for 3.5 hours is also a lot of time wasted.
And that's something we talk a lot about, here at the Austin Technology Council and others, is how do we work now with these other cities? For decades, when you thought of tech in Texas, it was Austin. And right. That's no longer true. And that's a good thing that Dallas and Houston and San Antonio have these bubbling ups of technology, of a lot of startups, of a lot of things going on. And there's I didn't invent the term, but everybody talks about sort of the Texas technology triangle, which encompasses those, 4 right. cities. And if you look at the population of Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, I think that area alone makes us like the 8th largest economy in the world, just what's going on right there. And that's something I think we have to harness. Instead of looking at them as competitors, I think all of the Texas cities need to start finding ways that we can play better together. So how do you think we do that?
Well, one would be a transportation system. That's a simple one, but
getting there would be good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're very different, right? If you had to, Dallas is kind of tech, electronics manufacturing. You've got Houston, which is very heavily oil and gas and maybe medical. You've got San Antonio with its unique set of companies and cultures. And then Austin has been like the tech, company here. I think with some good transportation options, you'll see more and more mixing of these economies happen over time. It just makes sense. I mean, we've got folks that we have one employee that lives in Dallas and drives down on Mondays and leaves at the end of the week, right? And it's a doable thing, right?
Yeah, it's close enough. You can, do that if you have to, for sure. Yeah. So I ask everyone who comes on the show, because my personal motto and belief is that whenever we have more community, more collaboration, and more conversations, we can solve all problems. So when I say those words, community, collaboration, conversation, which one resonates with you the most and why?
I would say that's a tough one because they're all important. I think you could say conversation leads to community or vice versa, but I think community. I think community is very important. I think starting a company requires you need a village, and there have been key people within this ecosystem that have been very helpful to us getting started and getting off the ground. One of the things that this is kind of might sound crazy to some people, but one of the reasons I love Texas is it has a nice balance of both political ideologies. So it forces people to kind of really, be tolerant and think outside the box, right? Whereas, you have some places and it's maybe a majority of one certain way of thinking and vice versa. But here in Texas, especially in Austin, like I think you're forced to learn to become tolerant to many different mindsets and ways of thinking. That's a good thing.
Nice. So if someone was coming to visit you, maybe someone you knew in Seattle, they'd never been here before, where would you take them to show them the vibe of Austin?
Well, I'd probably take them to Barton Springs pool and just throw them in. Tell them it's nice and warm, and let them experience. There's so many places that's what makes the cool thing about Austin. But maybe downtown, depends on which night and what's going on.
So as we wrap this up, any final thoughts about what you wish everybody locally knew about Yotta Energy and solar and the future of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think, Yotta is trying to help build the grid of the future. We see every rooftop as a potential to build a decentralized, dispatchable energy system that doesn't emit any pollution at all. It just sits there and works and builds a very resilient system. In fact, the solar eclipse that is soon to happen, but
it will have happened by the time this airs. Correct. Yes.
We're actually going to do a marketing demo where we're going to do what's called Hold the Sun. We're actually going to have the batteries continue to the solar output, despite the fact that the sun is going to dip and there will be very little solar production.
I hadn't even thought about the fact that solar production will drop for 2 minutes.
It will, and it's going to make a big deal. ERCOT sent out a notice asking people to cut back their usage during that time. We're getting to higher and higher levels of renewable energy. I think last week, at one point, 80% of the grid in Texas was powered by wind and solar. So when you completely cover the sun for a second, it could lead to a big problem.
Awesome. Hey, well, this was a fun conversation. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for being a guest here on the show. If people want to find out more about you or about Yotta, how do they find you?
Yeah, you go to yada 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 yada.
Little Seinfeld reference. Yeah.
Our website is www.yottaenergy.com. That's YOTTA energy.com. I am on LinkedIn. I like to connect with folks on LinkedIn. If you're going to add me, make sure you send a personalized note because I get a lot of folks trying to sell me stuff on a constant basis. I love giving feedback back to earlier stage founders because I was there once. So feel free to message me and ask any questions. If I have time, I will respond. And look for us. Next time you're flying on an airplane, look over and see the empty rooftops and be like, Yotta's going to solve it.
Yotta needs to be there.
Yotta needs to be there.
Nice. Well, this was great, and I'd love to get to know you better and maybe get you involved with the Austin Technology Council. So thank you for being here on the show.
Thanks, Tom. It's been great.
Hey, and thanks to everybody who tuned in and listened. You know what? We're doing a lot of things over at ATC. In fact, you've probably heard about the launch of the Austin Tech Hall of Fame, and that's something that we are launching. It's really a multiple year launch because you can't start a Hall of Fame with one person, and you can't drop 40 names into a Hall of Fame all in one day, or that would just be overwhelming and probably weird. So we're starting this year. We're going to have 6 legacy inductees, 1 current one, and our other award, which will take place at the same time, but a little unrelated, is the First Time Founder Award. So that is for somebody here in Austin who has a successful company who it was their first time trying to start a company. You know, we talk a lot about the people who've had multiple exits, but we have so many entrepreneurs here in town who are swinging for the fences and doing great things on their first time. So make sure that you've nominated people for the Austin Tech Hall of Fame and the First Time Founder Award. You can find that information on our website. And if not, just reach out to me. Hey, again, thank you so much for being here on the show. We'll be back next week with an interview with somebody else who's doing something really cool here in Central Texas. In the meantime, go out there and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.